High in the Rocky Mountains, winter snow and summer rain give birth to a river. This high country water flows through valleys and canyons and sustains countless ecosystems, millions of plants, animals, and people. Without this water, modern-day Denver, Phoenix, and Los Angeles would not exist and could not continue to grow. And as groundwater beneath urban areas in the West is contaminated, mountain water is becoming more important. It is generally considered pure, safe, a secure resource, but it is not. The source of the water is in danger. Although these massive mountains that give us our water seem indestructible, they are actually quite fragile. The most threatened ecosystems in the high country, the most used and most abused, are the sub-alpine valleys that lie between 9,000 and 11,000 feet above sea level. Many subalpine valleys have already been destroyed, sacrificed to toxic chemical and radioactive wastes and irreversible damage from mining operations and recreational development. On the horizon looms a new threat, acid rain. These problems, hidden in the high country, are slowly bleeding a steady stream of toxic heavy metals and radioactive waste into the headwaters of the western watershed, the western water supply.
The degradation of the water system in the United States generally, and in the West specifically, I think is one of the undertold stories in America, because we have such a limited amount and that we have so many toxic insults that we have sort of laying in wait out here in this great West to put into it.
The pristine quality of natural water is a very precious resource, and it is much cheaper to keep garbage out of the water in the first place than to try to get it out of the water once it's there.
Some people ask the question, why do we think we have an acid rain problem in the West when we've got a good deal less pollution than in the Northeast? And what they don't understand, though, is that our lakes, in many ways, are much more sensitive, much more vulnerable to small amounts of acid than the lakes in the Northeast.
I love this high country, and I have had beautiful chances to explore it and wander around in it, and I know the high valleys and the terrible fragility of it. We are absolutely dependent upon these high places for our water supply, for agriculture, for everything. So is every place downstream.
The water supply for most of the southwestern United States originates in Colorado's Rocky Mountains, where subalpine valleys along the Continental Divide form the watersheds of four major western rivers, the Arkansas, Platte, Rio Grande, and Colorado. 10 agricultural states downstream depend on the pure waters of the high mountain valleys. This is the water that 10 million people in the West drink, in places as far away as Los Angeles, Phoenix, and El Paso. 1 million people in the Denver metropolitan area drink water diverted from the mountains. After just 1 century, since the white man settled the West, industrialization and urbanization now threaten the mountain water upon which all life in the West depends. These problems confront high country regions throughout the western United States and throughout the world, but they are most acute in the Colorado Rockies. 60 million years ago, the collision of continental plates forced the land at the heart of North America 3 miles into the air and formed the Rocky Mountains. Those tremendous geologic forces created both the unique beauty and the rich mineral veins of the Rockies. Millions of years of wind, rain, and snow carved deep valleys in the high country. During the Ice Age, continuous snowfalls built ice packs that filled the valleys and grew slowly into glaciers. Under the immense weight of these flowing rivers of ice, the valleys were changed dramatically as the glaciers carved away the granite walls and widened the valley floor. When the glaciers retreated and melted away just 8,000 years ago, granite rocks of all shapes and sizes blanketed the valley floor. Running water sculpted the rock into gravel and sand, forming aquifers, underground reservoirs of flowing water, a natural filtration system that purifies water as it percolates through the earth. These aquifers provided a year-round water source for the ecosystems that have evolved in the glacial valleys. As the glaciers melted away, westerly winds carried spores and seeds, rain and dust, the ingredients of life, into the virgin valleys. Over the next 1,000 years, through the miracle of plant succession, spore became lichen, became moss, and slowly grasses, flowers, aspen, spruce, and fir established themselves in the glacial valleys. Free-flowing streams provided habitat for a rich variety of aquatic life. Beaver migrated into the mountains, built dams to hold back the water, and created a new niche for birds, insects, and other water dwellers.
The beaver is a very integral part of an alpine system because as the snow rushes off during the thaw, busy as the beaver, he's out there maintaining his dams, holding the water back. Now, he does a lot of different things. He stores water so it can be reabsorbed and come out in another aquifer. He saves the erosion onrush down, the taking away of nutrients and whatnot. He backs them up. He's doing it, of course, for his own purposes. But in so working for himself, he works for all the other people, in quotes, the ducks, the ouzels, the mink, muskrat. He works for all the plants in the valley, all the great bog plants depend on him. He has created a dependency, but an interrelationship. The best use of this valley is its own use as a high aquifer, as a gene pool. It's its own reason for being. And in so being, it's useful to us.
Each stream, each valley is like a living organism and is sensitive to changes in water chemistry. These ecosystems can tolerate a limited amount of acidity, chemicals, or heavy metals. Exceed the limit, and the balance of the ecosystem is destroyed. Healthy subalpine watersheds have played a crucial role in the human history of the West, for the high mountain valleys and aquifers provide a steady flow of pure water in this otherwise arid region. As American pioneers opened the West, the Rockies became a powerful symbol of the wilderness in the American psyche. The beauty and power of the mountains were a source of national pride. Painters such as Albert Bierstadt romanticized the mountains, captured their mystique, and stimulated the imagination of adventurers throughout the world. Beaver pelts attracted the first fortune hunters, mountain men the likes of Jim Bridger and Kit Carson, who explored the valleys and trapped the beaver to the brink of extinction. And in 1859, prospectors found gold in the stream beds of the Colorado Rockies, and the mountains and waters would never be the same again.
Well, they came from New York City, and they came from Alabama with their dreams of finding fortunes in this wild, unsettled land.
One thing about gold is people that are just strictly honest on everything else. When they see gold, they feel like they should have some of it. It's a feeling like a gambler gets, I guess, playing poker, and he's always looking for the big fortune. In the early days, there was no thought at all about environment, and they thought that they hit them huge ore bodies down there just out of town, and they thought they'd be forever, you know, and they'd put up a mill and just dump the tailings out in the hillside wherever they went. They didn't build a dam or try to contain them or anything because nobody thought anything about the environment.
The miners tore into the earth in search of ore. Gold dredging destroyed 3 valleys near Breckenridge. After hard rock miners had extracted the riches from deep mines, they simply moved on to another claim. Today, the abandoned mine shafts represent a serious threat to high country water. The old mines have filled with acidic water that overflows into streams. The state of Colorado estimates that there are 15,000 abandoned metal mines in the high country of the Central Rockies.
In Colorado, there are literally hundreds of mines that we've studied which are contributing significant quantities of heavy metals and acidity to receiving streams. Altogether, 25 major watersheds have been seriously affected. We've located at least 450 stream miles very adversely impacted by this problem of acid mine drainage. If all of the small receiving streams that directly get water from abandoned mines was added, I'm sure many thousands of stream miles have been affected adversely.
Underground water fills abandoned mine shafts and reacts with sulfide minerals and oxygen to form sulfuric acid. This highly acidic water then dissolves exposed metals in the mine shaft and flows out into streams. Once started, acid mine drainage never ends.
The rape of the West was in fact coming in here, putting placer mines, putting up mines. There was no laws about pollution of any kind, and the best way that people felt that they could dispose of the pollution was just to throw it in wherever that they happened to see the handiest place. And so the history of the West is a history of a lot of exploitation and an awful lot of feeling on the part of the miners that they weren't going to live here. They came here only to make their fortune. A lot of people didn't think that any people could live here on any kind of sustained basis. And they didn't spend a lot of time worrying about how they were disposing of their various pollution-causing items. Now, that legacy is coming back to haunt us. That we have a mine that has not operated since the 1870s over in Leadville that puts a daily dose of very heavy and very toxic pollution into our streams in Colorado.
For more than a century, Leadville has been Colorado's richest mining district. Its mines and smelters have supplied the United States economy with a steady flow of precious metals. For generations, fathers taught sons the skills of a difficult and dangerous trade, and the unique culture of mining survived both boom and bust. Every summer at Oro City, Leadville residents celebrate their mining heritage, from the gold camps of California Gulch to the Climax molybdenum mine.
Wash out your box into another container and then hand pan it later. That's how you separate your gold out down to where you can pan it with your mercury.
Is it true what they say about Climax? Does the snow really snow all the time? Do the big icicles dangle from everybody's home? Are the folks all set to wangle a nice warm job in Nome? Is it true what they say about Climax? Would a dream about hot steam be simply divine? Is it so in this snow a gal should be part Eskimo? It's true, and that's where I belong.
My family's been in this state since 1858, most of them miners, and I don't want to see my state ruined and our water ruined. You know, I want to see my kids to have a nice, healthy environment. But I also understand that there's only two things in life that make life what it is today, and that's agriculture and that's mining. We got to have food to eat, and industry must have raw materials to produce the things that we need for our lifestyle today.
The Leadville mines that once provided a livelihood and supplied the nation in times of war are now a serious problem. The Yak Tunnel, built in 1908, reaches 4.5 miles into the mountains to drain hundreds of underground mine shafts. Though the mines are long since collapsed and abandoned, tremendous quantities of polluted water continue to flow into California Gulch. Together, the Yak Tunnel and the nearby Leadville Drain discharge 3 million gallons of acid mine drainage per day into the Arkansas River. Every 24 hours, this wastewater carries 1 ton of heavy metals, a rate that has been continuous for over 30 years. According to the Colorado Division of Wildlife, aquatic life in the river has been adversely affected for 140 miles below Leadville. The Arkansas flows into Pueblo Reservoir, which holds drinking water for 500,000 people in the cities of Colorado Springs and Pueblo.
The important point is that these activities, this infiltration of water into mines, will occur now forever, and there will be a continual loading of metals from these sources. And in the future, as we get better methods maybe, we may be able to go into some of these areas and better control those. But it's been occurring now continuously in many mines for over 100 years. And for the most part, for most mine situations, it's going to occur for many thousands more years before man can do anything about it.
New Jersey Zinc shut down its lead, silver, and zinc mining operation in 1983 and abandoned 7 million tons of sand-like mill wastes called tailings on the banks of the Eagle River. The site is one of the biggest abandoned mines in the Colorado Rockies and was recently listed on the Environmental Protection Agency's Superfund priority list.
Behind us here is tailing pond number 1, and there are several springs and other sources of water upstream of this tailings pond. Water comes into this pond and it soaks down through these tailings. They're kind of sandy in texture, and it enters the Eagle River right in front of us here and behind us. And this seepage is high in heavy metals. It's also very acidic. The pH has been tested along the river here, and the pH is tested 3 in some of these quiet pools. But some of the metals that we find in this seepage coming into the tailings pond here are iron, manganese, zinc. There's traces of lead and cadmium.
To measure the acidity of water, scientists use the pH scale. Each single-digit drop in pH represents a 10-fold increase in acidity. As water becomes more acidic, its ability to mobilize heavy metals increases. Metals such as zinc and copper are essential to life, but in small quantities. Beyond a fixed limit, they are toxic.
Fish are the environment's miner's canary. They are one of the most sensitive of organisms to the effects of metal mining pollution. With things like lead, you get the severe physical abnormalities, loroscoliosis, spinal deformities, erosion of the caudal fin, things like that. But with an element like silver, you can get severe reductions in growth of the fish. Selenium causes severe lesions to develop, initially around the gills, but it ultimately will spread over the whole body. Something like mercury and selenium will bioconcentrate in the tissues, and then you end up with particular concern relative to human consumption.
This mine tailings has been here since the early 1900s, and some of the pollution problems have occurred gradually, and people have grown accustomed to seeing the changes in the river, and they've gotten used to it. But now with the ski recreation industry getting started, people downstream are having to use this water as a source of their public water supply, and they're very concerned about the heavy metals and the potential health impacts of drinking this water over a long period of time.
Telluride, a former mining town now famous for its ski resort and its music and film festivals, bears a giant scar from its mining past. The old Idorado mines produced over $1 billion worth of ore, while the mill piled 11 million tons of toxic tailings on the banks of the San Miguel River, just above town. A sprinkler system was recently installed in an attempt to stop the tailings from blowing across the town. A study by the Colorado Attorney General's office in 1986 documented major contamination of the San Miguel River and of Telluride's soil and groundwater.
When the reports came out, I think that a lot of people were shocked. And I think they were shocked at the very personal level of, here we've been growing vegetables in our vegetable gardens and strawberries and some of the things that'll grow even up here so high when we have such a short growing season. And suddenly you don't feel so good about that anymore. You don't feel so good about offering your little child a bowl of strawberries grown in your backyard because you don't know how much heavy metal will be coming along with the strawberries and cream. The tailings pond is right up here at the east end of town, which is basically the top of the watershed. There's now some real evidence that there has been leaching of very substantial contaminants into the groundwater, into the streams that come down here that form the rivers that flow on and on. The fish are found to be either dying or unhealthy. It's basically not a wholesome situation.
A 1978 study by the Centers for Disease Control found 4 telluride children with abnormally high lead content in their blood. In that same year, 2 of the town's water wells were closed after they were found to be contaminated with hexavalent chromium at levels 10 times higher than drinking water standards. Veins of radioactive uranium, the fuel for nuclear power plants and weapons, also lie buried in these mountains. At the Homestake Corporation's Pitch Mine, high on the Continental Divide, a mountain's face was torn apart in the late 1970s to extract uranium. The beaver down below the mine, whose ancestors had survived even the mountain men, were chased out of the valley by tons of radioactive silt. After the uranium market plunged in 1979, the operation was shut down indefinitely, but water still flows through the open pit mine, causing concern for residents downstream.
Uranium is messy stuff. Uranium tailings leaching out from the mine probably are getting into the soil as well as the groundwater, could thereby be brought into the grass, which cattle are grazing. It might also be getting into the creeks and rivers, which sportsmen like to go and catch fish in. And that way, the radioactive materials could easily be getting into the human food chain. Now, it's unlikely that anyone is going to die immediately of radioactive poisoning this way, but there is an increased risk of cancers and of birth defects, which can be carried on through many generations to come.
Modern-day mining dwarfs the old mom-and-pop mines that put towns like Leadville and Telluride on the map. Multinational corporations today move whole mountains, extracting relatively small quantities of valuable metals and dumping millions of tons of waste into nearby valleys.
I'm proud of the Climax mine. We found the ore body, developed it, found the uses for molybdenum, and through research and development have actually created the market. And the history behind this is like no other mine in the world. Climax mine is located right on top of the Continental Divide. We're at the headwaters of 3 rivers, the Arkansas River, the 10 Mile River, and the Eagle River. And we don't pollute any of those rivers.
The Amax Corporation's molybdenum mine at Climax is by far the largest mine in the Colorado Rockies. In 70 years of operation, Amax has extracted 460 million tons of ore to produce molybdenum, a metal used to harden steel. At full production, Climax employs over 3,000 people and processes 50,000 tons of ore per day. But by 1987, a slump in the molybdenum market had shut down the mine and mill and reduced employment to 50 workers. Tailings from the Climax molybdenum mill today cover nearly 2,000 acres. AMAX has dumped more than 300 million tons of tailings into 2 classic glacial valleys. Another 200 million tons of tailings could be produced in the 50 years that remain before the ore reserve is depleted. The major problem at Climax is the 25-foot snowpack that accumulates each winter and melts swiftly in the spring. The Climax tailings are covered with snow for 8 months out of the year. When AMAX designed its water treatment plant, the company severely underestimated the amount of water that flows through the tailings in the spring. The company's $8 million treatment plant is too small to handle the wastewater. As a result, the Colorado Health Department in 1980 granted AMAX a permit that allows spring runoff from the tailings to bypass the water treatment plant and flow directly into 10 Mile Creek. This means that water containing zinc, cadmium, and other toxic heavy metals flows off the tailings and into Dillon Reservoir, which holds part of Denver's drinking water supply. Here is the outflow of the water treatment plant in the fall. Here is the spring snowmelt from the waste dumps bypassing the water treatment plant.
If we don't have a snowmelt bypass because of the amount of snowfall, one of these dams could get too much water in it. And if that happened, it could break. So what we do is we have a snowmelt bypass where we take and mix the runoff water with some of our industrial water.
And there's no pollution problem with that?
No pollution because it's diluted so much. You know, and if you can imagine 300 inches of snowfall right where I'm standing, all of a sudden going all at once, there's not a problem with pollution.
AMAX's permit to legally release untreated wastewater directly into 10 Mile Creek extends for a period of 60 days each spring. But every year for the last 5 years, AMAX has conducted what the company calls an emergency snowmelt bypass, releasing polluted water for a period longer than 60 days. In 1983, for example, the emergency bypass lasted for 7.5 months. And dilution is not a viable long-term solution to the problem. All toxic elements go somewhere. In the case of the AMAX bypass, the metals flow downstream and accumulate in 10 Mile Creek and Dillon Reservoir. EPA records also show that AMAX committed 32 major permit violations between 1978 and 1986, releasing high levels of zinc, copper, cyanide, cadmium, and manganese in violation of their permit. Neither the state nor EPA has taken any significant action to penalize AMAX.
AMAX is one of the most frightening metal mines I've ever seen. That one mine is contaminating both sides of the Continental Divide and 3 separate rivers at least. It is an awesome trashing of some of the most beautiful country we know, let alone our water resources.
There are numerous slime pits and settling ponds at Climax, under which there are no protective liners to prevent seepage. Toxic metals percolate through the massive tailings piles and unlined settling ponds and move into aquifers beneath the now buried valley floor. No one knows where the heavy metals go from there, because for 70 years, no one has monitored them.
And in many instances, as you look at mining waste, there is not a discrete discharge of waste. And in many instances, they are discharging to the groundwater. When you look at the history of pollution control, one of the things that becomes very obvious is that pollutants have followed the line of least regulation. And the line of least regulation in many instances has been discharges to groundwater.
The kinds of problems we see with the metal mines at the head of our watersheds, where what should be the springs of renewal are becoming the sources of poison in our lives, suggests a breakdown of regulation which we thought was protecting us, and it obviously isn't.